Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be talking about the hiatus, or as I like to call, cancellation of Big Brother Canada in general. I talked about this briefly in my Big Brother Canada 12 review/retrospective video, and honestly, I'm just gonna wing it with this one since I really don't feel like going through all the details and all that jazz. But my overall, or my general thoughts on this is that I'm really not surprised that it got cancelled or quote unquote put on hiatus, and this is for a few reasons. Reason number one is that Canadian TV, actually, no, Canadian media is just incredibly weak in general. When it comes to a lot of Canadian television, especially, most of the shows that are aired there are American shows. And for a while, I think for several decades, or at least depending on the channel that it is, there was a mandate where there had to be a certain amount of Canadian shows that were on the channel. So it would still fall under some sort of legislation that it's Canadian. So this is where Big Brother Canada came in, where it's obviously a Canadian show produced in Canada, produced by a Canadian production company, and owned by a Canadian network. And what made this show work so well is the fact that it was very cheap to produce, and it filled up a lot of time slots for that 3 month period, especially during the spring of each year. So you got an hour on, for an example, Tuesday, an hour on Wednesday, and then an hour on Sunday. That's just me being facetious since I know they change a lot of the scheduling dates over the seasons, but you get it. There's content for 3 times a week that is cheaply produced and it has a decent amount of people watching and it has a decent sized audience. And they know that it's a decent sized audience because Big Brother US, which has always aired in Canada from 2000, has a big audience here to the point where a lot of the alumni would go to Canada for club appearances and they make a lot of money there, especially in the merit, not the primate provinces by Alberta, pretty much. From what I saw on a thread that was recently posted a few days ago, apparently that mandate of having a certain amount of Canadian shows for that channel or per channel doesn't exist anymore. And they're given the green light to outsource or guess insource. Anyways, they're given permission to take more shows from the US and air them in Canada, where they don't have to spend a lot of money creating a product that's Canadian owned, knowing the fact that it probably wasn't going to get a lot of those strong ratings anyways. So, for a lot of these networks, it's cheaper to just import a show that's already airing in the US and they don't actually have to spend money creating a production for it in Canada, which is pretty much what happened with all these Canadian shows. So this is the reports that I was referring to, and Corus is the media conglomerate in Canada that owns Global, and obviously Global is the network that Big Brother Canada was on. So it pretty much states that Corus gave permission to decrease money or budgeting money that would go towards Canadian content. And this was posted on May 13th, 2024. So this was around the time that BB Can 12 ended, and I'm going to look up the dates to see when it ended. So Big Brother Canada 12 ended on, let's see, Big Brother Canada 12 ended on May 8th. So this happened 5 days after the season ended. So it pretty much is clear to me, just from this report, that they made up their mind to end it pretty much soon after the show or the season finished. But obviously, there's most likely discussions way before the season completed. I'm just going to read the report. So, the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, CRTC, has granted Corus Entertainment permission to spend less money on Canadian content in light of the media company's warning of an increasingly dire financial situation, City News reports. Corus has now received the approval to decrease the percentage of its revenue put towards programs of national interest for its English-speaking stations from 8.5 to 5%. Okay, so this part is what I was referring to earlier. So 8, I'm rounding it up, 9% of the content with these Canadian networks needed to be Canadian, and now it is decreased to 5% in hopes that they're spending less money on producing these Canadian shows. So back to the report. Likewise, the CRTC has given the company its requested extension on the deadline for repayment for under expenditures of CanCon programming requirements. Last October, the broadcaster asked the regulator to make changes urgently that would give Corus much needed flexibility amid severely constrained finances and uncertainty surrounding advertising and programming. The CRTC noticed that Corus' spending on national, and I think it cuts off at this point, but you pretty much get the gist. And the fact that they mentioned last October, this means that well before the season was put into production, and probably around the time that they started casting BBCan 12, there was already discussion about limiting the Canadian content, which means that BBCan 12 was in danger way before BBCan 12 actually aired. The second reason as to why the show got cancelled, in my opinion, is that it wasn't a ratings draw, and honestly, it never really was. Obviously, comparing the ratings of Canadian shows to American shows is ridiculous because the population of the US is so much larger than the population in Canada. And you would think that a Canadian show can get away with lower ratings due to the mandates regarding the amount of Canadian content needed on these channels. And I think that worked in BB Can's favor for a while. What I didn't know is that the ratings dropped significantly from BB Can 9 onwards, and it never really recovered enough, especially compared to its prime ratings wise, which I believe was from BB Can 3 to BB Can 7 or 8. And even then, we all know about the hiatus that happened with BB Can 5 due to the lower ratings. But now that I'm looking at the ratings for the seasons, hold on, let me pull it up. Sorry for the gap. Okay. Obviously, the first two seasons of BBCan were on Slice and not Global, and that's a significantly smaller network. And the fact that it got moved to the main Canadian channel of Global in BBCan 3, or for BBCan 3 in 2015, is a very good sign. But once you look at the actual ratings, it pretty much was the same for 3 and 4, but then it decreased to barely a million in BBCan 5. Then it increased again in 6 and 7. If I remember correctly, yes, Big Brother Canada 7 is the highest rated BBCan season in general. And then it actually rose a lot in BBCan 8. But obviously, due to COVID, that season got cancelled and it was cut short. So ratings could have been even higher had that season continued. So technically, this is the peak ratings wise. When it came back for 9 and 10, it got less than a million views and the ratings kept on dropping and dropping. Apparently, BB Can 11 got higher ratings than BB Can 10, though I don't really see that on Wikipedia, but I noticed that a few of the YouTubers posted that it got higher ratings, and we don't know the ratings of BB Can 12. But just based on the trajectory of the last few seasons, ratings wise, and the social media lack of interest, I could predict that this season had low ratings, and that might have been one of the reasons why they decided to cancel it pretty much immediately after the season ended, kind of like BB Can 5. A lot of people are blaming the live feeds as to what, or the lack of live feeds as to why it got canceled. But as we all know, social media activity does not always, or mostly, it doesn't equate to live ratings and viewership, and that is what these networks care about. So, if there are no feeds and the social media activity was dead, but a lot of people were watching, then it would have continued being successful. But the lack of activity does indicate a lack of interest in comparison. So it's kind of a weird relationship there. So in general, the ratings just weren't very strong. And when you compare it to the viewership of BBUS in Canada, BBUS in general is just more popular in Canada than BBCan is in Canada. And I've met several other people who talk about watching both shows or both countries' versions of the shows that are Canadian, and they like the US one a lot more than Canada one, and they don't even watch Canada. So I do think that came into play, where a lot of the Canadians that watch Big Brother just prefer the American one. And that's also kind of due to conditioning, due to the fact that Canadians watched Big Brother USA since 2000, so there's a 13-year history there before BB Can even premiered. And the third and final reason, in my opinion, as to why the show got cancelled or quote unquote put on hiatus is the fact that Canadian television just doesn't last and has no longevity. Whether it's reality TV or scripted television, Canadian shows just do not last long whatsoever, and they don't catch on with Canadian audiences. And adding to the fact that they obviously have to produce these shows, and you have to spend a lot of money to produce shows, whether it's scripted or reality TV, and them not catching on, meaning that they're not recouping the amounts that they put in to spend and produce the shows, also just makes it a struggle and why a lot of these shows don't catch on. And there are cases where a lot of these lower rated shows do end up getting renewed over and over again, despite their poor ratings, due to the mandate regarding the amount of Canadian shows that need to be on. And I do think that BBCan was a beneficiary of this, as it was cheaper than obviously the scripted shows that are produced in Canada, and they would be cheaper than a lot of other Canadian reality shows, just from my assumption, because they're in a small lot for the entire season instead of traveling to here, there, and having to get learning permits. Not learning permits, sorry, filming permits. And in general, there's just so many shows that get canceled after 1, 2, or 3 seasons. And there have even been cases where Canadian shows get decent ratings for Canada's sakes, but they still get canceled because it costs way too much to produce, or it's easier for them to produce a cheaper Canadian show that will only get renewed for 1 to 2 seasons, then cancel it, then do it over and over and over again. So it's just filler. And that brings me to another point, or I don't know if it's another point or another co-point, but I'm just going to talk about it here. So I don't know if this is a continuation of the last point I discussed, or if this is a fourth point, but the last thing I'm going to discuss regarding the quote unquote hiatus, but I believe it's a cancellation, is the fact that Big Brother Canada was always a filler show. If I'm going to be honest, Big Brother in general is always a filler show. Even Big Brother US in the United States is a filler show. It is a very cheap show to produce. It takes up 3 months worth of screen time at most. Other times it takes 2 months, but still, it fills up a significant amount of time in a season or a year, and it airs 3 times a week. And there's a lot of low effort when it comes to structuring the episodes, since there's a set formula and there's no script that you really have to follow on. With Big Brother USA, the point of the show, especially in the US, was for there to be some content for CBS in the summer, so their channel wouldn't be completely dead, and so they'd be to get some sort of ratings. And it works for CBS, since the show has, I don't know if a cult following is the right word, but it has a decent sized audience, especially for a reality TV show. And the fact that it has lasted 2.5 decades really shows that it is a great filler show for CBS. And there's nothing that could take its place to fill that summer slot. Canada is a different story, and BB Can in general is a different story, since it airs in the spring, and there are a lot of shows that either continue from the fall season that is airing in the spring, or a lot of shows that solely air in the spring, so it was fighting for a lot of screen time. So while it was a filler show in the sense that, one, it provided a Canadian show so they could fill that quota. And two, it took up time slots 3 times a week. It wasn't necessarily as needed in Canada as Big Brother USA is in the US, since there are so many other shows, some that are Canadian, that would get those same ratings, if not more. And it's not like they could move BB Can to summer, since BBUS airs in the summer, and it's aired in the summer since 2000. So it works for that show as well, or that channel as well. And that channel I'm referring to is Global. So with the mandate and the quota changing, where the amount of Canadian shows went from 9% to 5%, Big Brother Canada really isn't needed anymore. So they decided to cancel it. So that is pretty much my thought on the cancellation or quote unquote hiatus of Big Brother Canada. I guess they could bring it back whenever they feel like it, since I believe that happened with Big Brother Australia, where it was cancelled and then it was brought back after like 8 or 9 years. And I guess that could happen with Big Brother Canada, where, as we know, it's not on the 2024 to 2025 schedule. And if it's not on for the next few seasons or years after that, and there's a vacancy that is needed, they could decide to revive and bring back BB Can, but it will be different, especially since there will be so many years of a gap between now and if, or the scenario where it would supposedly come back, where it might even get less ratings than beforehand. And it's not like the case with BB Can 5, where it was put on hiatus and then it came back after a few weeks, where it is adamant in this situation where it isn't coming back, or at least for this next season. And in general, I just think it ran its course. The fact that the show ran for 12 seasons and 12 years, and it's a Canadian show as well, is very successful, and that's very rare when it comes to Canadian shows. Obviously, I've dedicated a lot of time to watching the show, covering the show, and speaking about the show online throughout the years, and just really being invested in it during the springtime. But my life was fine before BB Can, and it will be fine after BB Can. If it comes back, great. If it doesn't, I'll move on. And I feel like that will be the case, or that is the case for a lot of you. Anyways, don't really mind the rambling, or I apologize for the rambling in this video. This is really the first video where I have absolutely no script, and I'm kind of just winging it, and I really just wanted to get this out there since I didn't want to wait too long, but I wanted to wait a bit so I could get a bit more information and to kind of formulate my thoughts on it. So there'll be a bunch of other videos coming up soon. You can follow me on other forms of media. The links will be in the description, and I'll be back with other content soon. Take care.